Love and peace, everybody. Firstly, I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Of course, I'm Akili Asha-Ali. Shout out to Pure Knowledge and Peace Customs. I'll leave the link in the bio for the shirt. That way, if you need any of your customized designs done for your business or for personal, you can get in tune with them as well. But shirts also will be available. That link will also be in the bio. I want to thank you all for subscribing, for liking, for sharing, for commenting. I appreciate all your support. I appreciate all of the concerns. Kind of been thinking for a while of what would I talk about? I mean, I was thinking about talking about some terminology and getting in tune with that, but I figured that the first place that you want to start with anything would be in history, I guess, of origin. So this idea of history or the origins of law, I'm not going to cover every aspect of law. Because there are going to be some people that are going to say, well, you missed this. You missed when the Babylonians set their law, or when the Sumerians, like, I'm not going to go that far into law. My major focus of law is how and the origins of the English law system, okay? So I'm going to give you a little bit of history about where the English law system gets their origins, but I'm not going to dig into every law, okay? So anybody else who wants to get on YouTube and decides to go through and with a fine-tooth comb and wants to dig entirely into that, more than welcome to you. I'll probably watch your channel. But me, the only reason I'm doing this is because I understand that for anybody to get something, you have to have some type of understanding of where it comes from, the history, the origins. So I'm going to give you this because it's important. Now, I believe that there are a lot of people that may have come to this channel looking for some type of overnight solution, some type of template. I'm going to give you all the answers. I know it all. And that's just it. From my studies and my research that I've done in this field, that has never worked for me. Now, the reason that will never work is because you have to understand the process. You have to understand the history. You have to understand, you just have to have understanding of it. There's nothing you're going to be able to beat or conquer if you don't understand it. So, firstly, you have to read. You have to do the research. So that's what I did. I was tired of throwing around these, this time and this time. So what I did was I went out and did the research for you guys. So let's get it started, okay? So let me look at my paper. So the whole idea of law began with the universal law. So let's just start there. There's no law above the universal law. The laws that the planets even use to orbit in, all those universal laws and gravitational poles. Now, I don't want to get into it with any of the conspiracy theories about there's no such thing as gravity. Whether there's a such thing as gravity or not, we have to agree that the planets themselves operate in some type of let's say divineness, this dance that these planets do, that is an order that no man or woman can pretty much obstruct. It's been here, it's been calculated, it's been watched and observed by the ancients for a long time. Now, those laws, those are the very principles and laws that all law come from. The idea of law comes from that. Things that can't be broken, things that are ordained by the divine. So that is the first idea of law, period, point blank. You can argue with yourself about where law comes from, but the first idea of law is the divine laws of nature, okay? Now, I'm not going to go into details on all that because that's not what this video is about. Maybe I will later on, okay? Divine laws. Now, From these divine laws became this idea of theocracy. And that's the main topic of my discussions, because theocracy is a well looked over topic. When I first came across it, I didn't really, I didn't understand the importance of it. I kind of took note of it, and I finished this entire presentation, so to speak. And I was like, oh my God, this thing is about theocracy. It's about theocracy and nothing else, okay? So theocracy, by definition, it is the idea that the church or priest rules in the name of God, okay? Now, this idea of theocracy, excuse me, I don't know why I'm fumbling my words, theocracy. This idea of theocracy has been around over 5,000 years, right? The idea that the church rules in the name of God. Now, where did this idea come from? Because this is the very idea that creates law. Okay? Now, this idea has been carried on for 5,000 years. This idea goes back probably to the Egyptians, Sumerians, some of those cultures. Now, I'm not going to 100% say for sure that any of those cultures did or didn't practice it. I mean, I'm sure there are instances that in history where they did practice theocracy. But I could tell you that in the Egyptian culture, where exactly the Greeks got it from was that the Egyptians named their rulers. The names of their rulers told what they believed. Just to give you a couple ideas. Let me see. So Tutankhamun, that name was that originally translates into living image of God. Akhenaten, beneficial to God. Ramesses, begotten of Ra, and Ra is God. So this is how the rulers and Egyptians felt of themselves. They felt like they ruled from a seat of being from the Most High. Like the names, all the names, if you go back of the Egyptians, a lot of those names have something to do with God. It's either saying Aman, which Tutankhamun, Akhenaten, like their names were all had something to do with of God. So that was the idea that the Greeks got from them, that to use to pretty much come up with this idea of theocracy. Okay? So here the Roman Catholic Church has this idea of theocracy, and that's what they created the church based on, that the idea that the church sits underneath God and they rule on behalf of God, in the name of God. Now, because in Great Britain, the church was the law. So that was all that they knew. So there was no separation of church and state in the British, in the England culture. Their pastors, their preachers ruled from the church. So this is called theocracy. Okay? I want you guys to understand that. Before we get too far into this, I need you to understand this, because it's important to understand the bigger picture behind this whole law picture, because I didn't understand it when I first started studying it. I didn't know what I was going to be finding out. I was just thinking, okay, I'm going to give you guys a little bit of history, which is going to show you that I know what I'm talking about. But in studying it, I found out some things that were interesting to me, that I already knew, but I just brought some terms to it. Like, I knew the idea that the church was the head of everything, and they were the ones who were pushing this idea that they had a right based on God for them to rule. But I never knew it had a term to it. So when I look at theocracy, I look at it as the same as the democracy or any of those other political organizations, because it's designed to control you politically. So that's what you need to understand about theocracy. It's a religious way to control you, or a religious idea that controls people politically. Okay. Okay, so like I said, the Greeks got it from the Egyptians, and that's proved because Plato, Aristotle, Hippocrates, whatever his name is, Thios, and Plato, and Pythagoras, all those guys studied in Egypt. So all those Pythagorean theorems and all that stuff came from the Egyptians. So they didn't get their ideas of natural law, which they give natural law theory. They give the credit to Aristotle when Aristotle studied directly from people who studied from Egypt. So that's not something I'm going to spend too much time on or try to debate with anyone about, because that's easy for you. The timeline is there. It says 324 that Aristotle is coined with the idea of natural law when that theory comes from Egyptians way before him. Okay, so one second. Okay, so like I said, the Romans got the idea from the Greeks, who got it from the Egyptians, that this idea of theocracy, that the church would sit at the seat and rule in the name of God. Now, this belief is over 5,000 years old, and I don't want to jump my timeline, but I'll tell you that this belief was still practiced and believed up to at least the 16 or 1700s. It was well accepted by the 1600s, so my bad. It never stopped, okay? Now, let's get back to the origins, okay? So England, this idea of natural law comes to the Great Britain, the English people, through Aristotle, and the Roman Catholic Church is the complete opposite of that, and they've created this law system and this religious system that they've created to kind of combat this free thought of Aristotle that they didn't need at that time. So, and what happened is that the law system actually got started in 1066 when they were conquered, when England was conquered by the Normans. And they said back then, the Normans knew the way to conquer a country was that you, in order for you to conquer them and control them, was you had to establish a court. So in order to unify the whole country under one rule, their strategy was to set up a court. And they did that in England. They set up a king's court in England. And that's how they took over England, was they took it over through the court. So this is a long old practice that how England got took over was through the court system and the Normans. Okay, this is written in my law book, so I'll give you guys the credentials on that. But 1066, so this is when the first law system of England was established, and it was established by the Normans. Okay, so in 1215 comes the Magna Carta. So in 1215, the people had got tired of being taxed, and pretty much through the court systems, and they were tired of taxing, and they were tired of the slavery. So what they did was to give you the short-ended version of it, was they invaded the castle pretty much, and they forced the king. They forced the King John to sign the Magna Carta. And the Magna Carta was like the first written document for that the people forced somebody in power to sign, to hold them to some authority that's saying that they're not above the law and they're not above God. So the Magna Carta is a very important document for anybody that's studying to go and study, because this document, like you said, this is a place where the people had no rights. The king is the one who gave them everything, all their rights. And they rose up and they came together, and it was the people, I think they were called the barons, is they forced King John to sign the Magna Carta to limit his power. Now, after that happened, which, like I said, that is deemed as like the first pretty much writing for English law that gave people rights and then established that the government wasn't above the law. Okay. So 1215, that happened. The 1500s, Europe began arriving in America. So okay, let's touch on that right there. So before Europe arrived in America, before the 1500, American had its own system and ways of handling things. Okay, I want y'all to understand that so I want you to understand that after Europe arrived, the difference in the laws of the land, so to speak. When you get invaded by another country, the laws of the land are probably going to change to the people who conquered you. So I want you to understand that thought. So we come back and I revisit that a little later on, that you understand what I'm talking about. So 1500s, Europe began to arrive, and then I guess there's some documentation say that in the 1500s that even the first African slaves were in North America. In the 1600s, the British king began establishing the colonies, and then by the 1700s, all 13 colonies were established. Now, when they say established colonies, I want y'all to understand what happened. That means that they came in and cleared out the indigenous people. That means genocide. That means wars, because you got the Indian Wars that took place in between all of that. That means pretty much enslavement. So we can not decorate what really happened when they say colonies and colonized, and America was colonized by them. Let's just call it what it is. It was enslaved. It was genocide. It was making treaties and stuff with the Indian people that you never planned on keeping, pushing them out to the worst parts of the area, the undeveloped places, and bullying, pretty much strong arming. It's the way the British colony existed in Great Britain. It's no different. So by the 1700s, they had established the 13 colonies, okay? So in the 1700s, also what happened was the King Court was established, the Chancery Court. See, they had done this before. Go back and look at your history. Like I told you, in 1066, the Normans, the ones who made England the way they are, the way you look at England today is the Normans. The court system comes from the Normans. They conquered them, and the first thing they did was set up a king's court. Now, after the 13 colonies were set up here, what does little brother do? They learn from big brother. Set up the king's court. The king's court, by definition and by the words from the book that I read, not from me, it says was used as a means to establish the king, to unify the country under one rule. Began the process of unifying the country. So what you think is what law was created for, it was very clear to the Normans why they would set up a legal system in a place that they just conquered. To unify the country. Just because you conquer it doesn't mean that everybody on that same piece of land is going to have the same ideas, beliefs. You got to understand that these court systems, when you look at the old pictures and the times of this, they had these court hearings out in the public, and there'd be a lot of people out there. It was not all the people. There was no way they didn't have that much attention. They didn't have media then. There was no way to get the attention of all the people. Those crowds grew as time came, right? More people got involved. So it's almost like entertainment, and people just started paying attention, and then they got engulfed in it. Okay? So 1700s, King's Court, 1700s, Slave Patrol, 1740, anti-literacy, prohibiting them from teaching black slaves how to read and write. And I'm just going through some of these just to give you some ideas of these timelines, because some of these things are going to be relevant to touch on. Like I said, in the 1700s, 1756, 1763, the Indian and French Wars. And then you had 1776. Okay, so 1700, The 13 colonies were established, the British colonies. 1776, you have the Declaration of Independence. So after 70 years after these colonies had been established, guess what the reasons why the Declaration of Independence were even, why this war, this revolution, 1775 American Revolution, excuse me, then 1776 the Declaration of Independence. After 75 years these colonies have been established, they were sick of being taxed. They were sick of slavery. That's the reason why, again, the people rose up. They revolted. So, rewind. 1776, the Declaration of Independence, should have been technically the end of all English colonization in America. But the court was never abolished. But think about it. The people up top, the smart people, knew what was going on, because the Normans knew exactly what they were doing when they set up their court system. They didn't have to put down any of the other traps that when England came and invaded America that they did. They just set up the court system and let the court system just kind of bring everybody under one control. So the Declaration of Independence and and all that did nothing for the freedom of this country. I want you guys to understand that, because people want to think that I'm some type of I'm not for my country. There can be no one more for their country if I'm telling you the truth about what happened to the country. When the country got invaded, those indigenous people that were here before that, those people were the people who had it de jure. That's the rightful government of this country. Now, when you get a country that invades and then takes over your country and sets up its legal systems, that is a government de facto. So from day one, the setup of this court system was a de facto government. It couldn't be a de jure government because it's not a government of the people, a true government of the indigenous people here. I want you guys to understand that. Okay? So that's what makes it de facto. And what I mean by de facto, the definition of de facto is an action taken without strict legal authority to do so, but recognized as legally valid nonetheless. It's an action that is only valid by contract or by consent. Okay, now the definition of de jure. Latin for by law or by right, and was used as a practice that exists by right or according to law. Now that's the difference between de jure and de facto. Now, so when I say a de facto government and I say a de jure government, you understand the difference on how those governments are set up. One is acquired by right, and one is by invasion, or by agreements, by contracts, by force. That's the difference. So there's one thing I have to go back on. I was skip my timeline because, like I said, when I was studying this, I kind of bumped into a lot of things that I kind of didn't believe, didn't know how they all tied together, but I felt the need to bring them up because we're talking about theocracy here. So we got to give the origins of law its proper due respect, and the fact that it comes from theocracy. It comes from religion. Okay? So what happened is in the 1400s, we have to talk about what happened was the Spanish Inquisition. Now, in 1478, Pope Sixtus IV issued a decree authorizing the Catholic monarchs to root out heresy in Spanish kingdoms. Now, this was code for ridding out people who were not a part of the Catholic Church or Christian belief. So the Christian armies defeated Muslims and took over Spain. Now, that was just one of the chess piece moves that was set up by the church in order to establish their dominance of the monarch. So one more thing about the Spanish Inquisition that has to be understood, that we have to visit here. Now, like I said, when the Pope made this decree authorizing Catholic monarchs to root out the hearsay in Spanish kingdoms. This was pretty much an act of war against Muslim countries, against people of color, against people who didn't have already a Christian-based or Catholic-based system. So it was pretty much Great Britain's or England's way of kind of invading and taking over the world and establishing it themselves through religion as this dominance. So like we've always talked about, and it kind of hurts people when we say this, is that the church, the Roman Catholic Church, was created in order to control people. So the way they used it was to conquer and control. I want people to understand that. So in the 1400s, after this Spanish Inquisition happened, then you fall into England coming to America, right? So I talked about that already. So we go back to 1776, the Declaration of Independence. When in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of earth the separate and equal stations to which the laws of nature and nature's God entitle them. A decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they declare that causes which impel them to separation. And now it says, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they're endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, and that our governments are instituted among men deriving their just power from the consent of the government. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it. Okay? So, with that being said, these are the beliefs of the very intelligent people at that time that understood the importance to keep the separation of powers, as far as people having the right to exercise their beliefs and not having the laws being able to invade them as far as their belief goes. Okay, so Declaration of Independence. Okay, we moving on along after that. After the Declaration of Independence, and America was supposed to be free, which it was not. It was just cloaked, I guess, as a British Empire state. The British Empire State. So I feel like I'm on Star Wars now. Empire State. So yeah, 1785, the first prison opened in Massachusetts. 1787, the Constitution of the United States. And I'm not going to get into the two different constitutions right now. The only thing I want to get into is the basics of this information, so then that way I can get the people to understand where I'm coming from. So the Constitution was written for a reason. And the people who wrote it understood that there had to be a separation of also religious powers, because you have a right to exercise your freedom of religion. Now that's in the Bill of Rights, right? Freedom of religion and exercise thereof, right? So that was written in there. It was pretty clear that these people wanted to make sure that you knew that there was a separation of them, that this theocracy idea couldn't poison the law. Okay, so federal courts established in 1789, 1790, the Naturalization Bill, U.S. citizen created. 1800, the French acquired the Louisiana Purchase from Spain, who had had it since 1762. Now the Louisiana Purchase, let's touch on that a little bit. Now, there was no when the French acquired the Louisiana Purchase, I don't believe that they thought that they were going to sell it, because they had a good relationship with a decent relationship with Britain at the time. So they were both occupying the same land, just kind of taking over, different areas, kind of, so to speak. But I think what happened was, not think, but I read what happened was is they feared that there would be conflict with them. So what they did was they sold it back to the United States of America, the country, because they didn't. I don't believe they understood that that the Great Britain had a control over the court system still, and that they were going to that the people still really they still had a hold on the people. I just think they did it because the French actually helped the America in the Revolution. I want you guys to remember that it was Spain and France who actually helped the American people during the Revolution. So when they sold it back to them, I believe it was like a more of a courtesy, like, hey, look, take your stuff back, you know, be your own, be independent kind of deal. And they made some money off of it, so it wasn't like all the way honorary. So 1839, first legal dictionary, American law was John Bouvier, one of the first ones. So I hear people talking about like Bouvier, don't use that, or Black's law. But you got to go back and find these dictionaries that they you know, when they were established and they were used. And if they were highly highly known at the time, then why not be able to use those for your legal definitions or yeah, your legal definitions today. Okay. Now I pick Iowa Supreme Court because that's where I'm originally from. So Iowa Supreme Court was established in 1846. Now, in 1875, the revised statutes of the United States Code. So this is probably the first attempt at the United States Code that they had. In 1900 was the driver's license. The first standard birth certificate is in 1907. In order to enforce this, what the government did was they went to the employment agencies, and they forced them to only hire U.S. citizens. And at this time, 1907, around the corner, 1929 was the Great Depression. So the times in the Great Depression, people didn't have any money. The country was bankrupt. So, of course, people are going to do whatever they have to do to be able to provide for their family. So what happened is that after they created this birth certificate, in order to enforce it, like I said, they went to the employers and told them they can only hire U.S. citizens. So that between the time of 1940 and 1945, it was documented that more than 4 million or 40 million people had went and signed up for a birth certificate. So that's how they kind of enforced that and made people come into this whole citizenship thing. The naturalization bill had already been passed in 1790. Okay, so the ecclesiastical canons for Roman Catholic Church was in the 1917. 1918, all children were required to attend public school. 1926, the United States Code. 1939 through 1945 was the World War II and Nazi Germany. So during that time was also, they were dealing with the Great Depression here too. And like I said, they mandated everybody, all the employers to hire only citizens. So that way they got everybody to turn in those, the birth certificates and submit themselves to pretty much the state, right? In 1954, the Supreme Court outlawed subrogation in Brown versus the Board of Education. And in 1975, child support. 1976, CPS. So these are just to give you a little bit of timeline of some of these things, because people believe that a lot of these things were like so long ago. Oh, and okay, just because I have to mention this, the United States was incorporated in 1933. So people believe a lot of these things to be so long ago when a lot of these things aren't that far away. So the idea again, theocracy. Where did the American court system come from? It came from the Roman Catholic Church. The Roman Catholic Church created this idea of theocracy. well, not created it, they borrowed it. So the Roman Catholic Church used this idea of theocracy and they embedded it into the law to the point that anybody who was anybody who was in the law or who would be subservient to the law would submit pretty much to the will of this theocracy idea. The court system was created by an idea that the belief that the church or the priest rule in the name of God. That idea was still valid and well accepted, still valid, but well accepted idea across all these English colonies by the 1600s. And that idea is still being expressed here today. Now, so when you get a man that says he has a God-given right for something, and you see him, where did that come from? Did you understand that sometimes even in back in the days of slavery, not just back in the days of just slavery, but in order to justify slavery, the Europeans used to pull out their Bibles and say, hey, look, I got a God-given right to have slaves. But now since people are saying it, it's being labeled as this bad movement because people are now saying they have a God-given right to do something. But the Constitution also says that you have a freedom of religion and exercise thereof. So I guess since it's not termed God-given rights, I guess it doesn't, like, I just don't get it. What I don't get is how people don't understand, like, the logic. How people aren't understanding and bringing together the dots of what's really going on here. What's really going on here is that the Britain came up with the perfect idea to conquer the world. The perfect ideas to conquer the world. And that was religion. And then they borrowed an idea that they got when they got conquered was through the court system. So they merged both of those together. So this has been and always will be a theology takeover. This is theocracy. I believe I've shown you guys that. The court systems themselves are engulfed with Catholic religion. It has a Catholic background. You can't deny that now. It's a Roman Catholic Church background. Now, with that being said, it was pretty much it was pretty much going to be a no-brainer that any country that they invaded and put down this court system was going to adhere to this Roman Catholic organization, whether or not they were Roman Catholic or not. So now America is pretty much the greatest country because of this thing right here. There are people who are Buddhist. There are people who are Muslim. There are people who are all different religions that are still underneath the control of this Catholic religion. At the end of the day, this Catholic religion controls them. They all have to submit to this system of Catholic and Roman Catholic beliefs. This theocracy, this political structure that's been alive for over 5,000 years that you'll never hear any of these other gurus talking about because they don't understand the bigger picture. And it took for me to go out and do the studying to understand it. Because at first I'm thinking, okay, I'm just going to do the origins of law. And the more I started digging, the more I had to go back. The more I had to go back. The more I had to go back. The more I had to continue like, wait a minute. This isn't the beginning. Where did this come from? Where did this start? How did they get this? And these ideas, this idea of theocracy is the same idea that has controlled the world for over 5,000 years and still running. So when you think of political structures, when you think of democracies, when you think of Republicans, think of theocracy. Theocracy is the main cloak covering all political movements, because at the end of the day, they all are going to submit to the same political structure, which is the church that has been established by the Roman Catholics. Okay? So I think I've done what I've set out to do here. I want everybody to like, comment, subscribe. Because, I mean, like I'm telling you, we're going to figure this thing out. I think people do want, everybody wants the solution, but you can't just get the solution. In order to understand the solution, you got to understand the history. You got to understand how, the hows, the what, when, where, hows. Like, you don't understand those, you'll be lost forever. You'll have somebody leading you with paperwork and processes and feeding you the next structure. And then when you go to court, you're not going to be able to stand on any of these things. You can't fight something that you don't understand. And the reason, because you don't understand the history of it. Nobody's going to tell you about this theocracy. I'm not saying that they don't know or they're keeping it a secret, but maybe some people didn't understand it from this standpoint or this standpoint. It took for me to go back out and go back through the timeline to see, okay, wait, this idea of theocracy is the one that's really the problem. That the church or the priest rules in the name of God. That idea has infected every other organization because they all adhere to the same organization that started it, or not started it, that has reciprocated it. Thank you for your time. Love and peace, everyone. Like I said, like, subscribe, comment, and I'll let you know, and you'll be notified when we have another banger. Love and peace. Make sure you get one of the shirts. All right. It's down in the comments. I'll put the link down in the comments. Peace and love.